Mr. Gary Griffith.
Yeah, Mr. Griffith.
Good
Yeah.
evening.
Good evening and happy New Year.
Is the first time
Happy
you talk
New
to people
Year.
when you're laughing?
That was an interesting interview. Good
Gary,
evening to you all. How are you? Happy New Year.
Gary, how
Happy
you
New
doing?
Year.
You know, what is that you have in your bag? That is archery do? And he left in the
So
back of your head. What is
those
that?
are military swords. As a commissioned officer in the military, Army or Coast Guard, that is what you wear on parades. So anytime there's a parade, the other ranks will have rifles, and you as the commissioned officer, that's the rank of lieutenant, captain, colonel, major, colonel, general. That is what you would have, indicative that you must have some type of arm. So the commissioned officer will carry the sword on parades, whilst the other ranks will have rifles.
And
Yes.
what is the third one? The one to the left. The other
Well,
one. There's two of them.
there's three different swords. I had different aspects. When it is, I was in the defense force, and the one on that side is the good old camouflage, which I love.
Is the one you're banned? Like the one you're banned.
Oh Lord.
Trinidad and Tobago is the only country in the world that if a child has a pink camouflage toy, a lady has a yellow camouflage short pants, it is seen as a threat to national security. It is one of the dumbest laws. It caused a lot of embarrassment to our immigration when tourists come inside and they say, so a child with a yellow camouflage toy is illegal. Is this going to be a threat? So we misinterpreted the Defense Act, where it's supposed to be any camouflage in the resemblance of that of the Defense Force. And only about 7 or 8 countries in the world have that, mostly in the Caribbean. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball. So we have a law, and if you go into Piaco, anything in the resemblance of camouflage is a crime. People don't make laws deliberately to inconvenience people. You make laws to protect a country. A child, as I said, with a blue camouflage toy, how could that be seized and say that is a threat to national security? But that is where they are trying to change that from the banana republic era, because the present government I spoke to them about it. It has caused many issues, but I'll deal with it when the government changes.
Hey, so Mr. Griffith, we wanted to get your expertise regarding a state funeral, and share with us what is normally the procedure or protocol when they're having a state funeral, based on what you know. What
Sure.
kind of help us here, because we didn't really understand.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
know,
so the main thing in a state funeral that we must not do is to jump over railings. I'm only joking.
No. Oh, she coming back in.
I know she'll come back. Easy, Karen. I was only joking. So there are 4 seriously now. So there are 4 different types of funerals you can look at, and under how we have it drafted. So there's a state funeral, and the state funeral is usually only for those serving presidents or prime ministers. So unless you are serving president or prime minister, that is when you are entitled to a state funeral. You then have an official funeral. An official funeral will be for serving chief justice, government ministers, and previous presidents and prime ministers. You then have something that is known as a state-funded funeral, and that will be for persons who, like for example, President Robinson's wife, Gordon Draper, persons who may have retired as a retired minister. And then you have a military funeral. That's the 4th. That is where you have somebody who has serving presently in the defense force. You have died while serving, and especially if it is that you're a military officer, that is, there are colors, there are all sort of different pallbearers and so forth. So in this situation, however, what we have done is that previous prime ministers, the government can decide to state that, okay, even though you are not a serving prime minister or president, we would like to make an amendment through a cabinet note to have it as a state funeral. And that was done, the first time that was done really and truly was in 1971 with Sir Larry Constantine, where he wasn't a prime minister or president, but he was given a state funeral. And then it went on to Sir Ellis Clark, who was a previous president, and then the government decided to give him a state funeral, where really and truly it's supposed to be an official funeral. It then went on to, so Eric Williams, he was a sitting prime minister, so that was automatic. Others such as Patrick Manning, President Robinson, they would have been given a state funeral. I was the coordinator for President His Excellency Robinson's funeral where again it would have been an official funeral because he was no longer sitting prime minister or president. The government at that time decided to give him a state funeral. That was a 5-day state funeral. That was the most difficult funeral because that funeral took place in 2 different islands. And then you had previous Prime Minister Manning, the same decision was made. And then also with WZYE Pandey. I think George Chambers, he decided to have a private funeral. So he as a Prime Minister did not have a state or official funeral.
Correct.
I think it was a government funded, state funded funeral. And I think the same may have happened for President Hassan Ali because they decided not to have it as a state funeral. So that's the concept. It's state, official, state-sponsored, state-funded, and military. The last funeral would have been a state funeral.
But then what about the people who are invited to those things? Is it because and let me ask this question because there's a voice note circulating. If it's a state funeral, shouldn't it be that the people of the state can attend that funeral based on the capacity? I mean, if it's 1,000 capacity, ain't 1.4 million people. I mean, it will show up.
But I'll give you an example. Okay, so here I was pulling up some files. So here, this is what I had here, and this would have been, as I said, I was the coordinator for President Robinson's, His Excellency's funeral. So I had what I did. I mean, it's a lot of work for a state funeral. You're speaking about administration, protocol, logistics, infrastructure, public information, the ceremonial aspect, the security. So it's a lot of logistic and administrative work. One obviously would include the invitation. So the invitation list, what I did was a color-coded list, have it color-coded, the color code with the priority being green, and they had that being like the Prime Minister, the President, Chief Justice, speakers, cabinet ministers, leader of the opposition, and members of the House of Representatives, members of the Senate. You then go down to the yellow code was for ministers of state, heads of religious organizations, heads of the protective services, heads of business. Then going on to a blue code, which would have been high commissioners and ambassadors. You then go on to a red code where I had such as president of the CCJ, justice of appeal, judges of the High Court. Then I went on to orange, which would have been mayors, chairman of commissions, ombudsman, president of the industrial court, director of the public administration. Going down to purple now comes the family of the deceased. So the family obviously has a part to play. So even though it is a state funeral and the state runs it, you must take into the aspect that you have to look after the wishes of the family. But once it's a state funeral, the state has really full control. What you do is obviously for protocol reasons, for compassion, you will make sure that you, as much as possible, support the family and adhere to their wishes. And then finally, you could go on to guests of the family, that's the heads of business organizations and so forth. So for President Robinson, there was 987 people. And again, we had to do a logistic nightmare of taking hundreds of soldiers and others to take them from Trinidad to Tobago. So the invitation list is usually between that of the state making the decision and that of the family.
And so let's fast forward now, Gary, to WZYE Pandey funeral, where the former president of the Senate showed up, Mr. Hamel Smith, and then high jump Karen, as you want to call her. Karen showed up. And Mr. Griffith, I want to think this, right? I want to think that, let's put Karen aside. If the former president of the Senate shows up, and I'm sure they all know him, you don't think they should make an exception even though he didn't have an invitation and allow him to come in?
Well, actually, it should have gone before that. Again, if it is that those persons who organized the funeral did their homework, because I did, there was not a flaw in President Robinson's funeral, if I do say so myself. The reason being is that I formed a committee, an interministerial committee involving the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of National Security, Ministry of Tourism, several different ministries, and then also involved other elements to ensure that we did not make a mistake. Constantly on a daily basis, I would be speaking to His Excellency Robinson's daughter, making sure that every single thing I did was clockwork, it would adhere to them and to their wishes. And along that line, I would not have left out somebody of that caliber. So it is not. This is not a faux pas. And again, it is unfortunate. this is typical of the PNM. This is how they operate. Had Timothy Hamilton not been the political leader of a party opposed to the PNM, he would have been invited. That's what all this was about. But the people are trying to, and that is why I would have recommended that Karen and Timothy didn't try to do hurdles to get inside, because it was lost. The damage of the disrespect of him as a previous president not being invited has now been smothered because of the railing situation. But if we go back to the actual thing as it pertains to protocol, they were wrong, because there were dozens upon dozens of seats available. So it's not to say that, the place sold out and there was no room in the inn for the president of the Senate. As I mentioned to myself, I was the closest person to the prime minister. I was his military attaché. I was in command of his security, his administration, his protocol, his events, his management, his budget, everything. And you didn't see it fit to invite me? No, it's because Gary Griffith is the political leader of a party opposed to the government. So that's all it was. So it's not about protocol and there was no room. Some of the people that I saw there on that list that were not family members, they were nowhere near the pecking order in the protocol list as it pertains to a previous president of the Senate. So that is all it was. But it is not the first time. I mean, I could even tell you for Independence Parade, the previous commissioners of police would be invited. They have created history and given instructions for me not to be invited. That's how petty the PNM is. At the commissioners, the administrative building for the office of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the substantive previous commissioners of police are the first ones to be invited at the toast at the police headquarters. The instructions were given to police not to invite me, and this is the police service. I was the last substantive commissioner of police, and persons all be after me who are acting commissioners, who are acting ACPs, are invited to the toast of the nation at the police headquarters. And McDonald Jacob and Earl Christopher, as weak as they are, were working to say, well, I don't think they can't invite me because I am opposed to the government. That is how bitter, petty, and immature this government is, where you could give instructions to tell the commissioner of police, do not invite the previous substantive commissioner of police to a toast to the nation that has been mandatory for the last 50 years. We are not going to invite Gary Griffith and Timothy Smith, even though they deserve to be there more than probably 90% of those persons, because they're opposed to the government. So it had nothing to do with, there was no room. It had nothing to do with shortage. It had to do with just basic petty politics. So Timothy and them trying now to wave and all of that, the decision was already made. You're opposed to the PNM. The PNM reluctantly had to invite the members of parliament in the opposition, because under the chair, that would have looked totally ridiculous. But anybody comes after that, once you're opposed to the government, you will not be invited. And that is how, unfortunately, that is how petty and immature this government is.
I didn't know, Mr. Griffith, that you didn't get an invitation.
No, I wasn't. But the point is, so be it. So what? What I did, I understood. I knew in advance this is going to be a state funeral. The PNM is going to make sure they're going to blacklist certain names. That's how they operate. And then what I did, however, was to make sure that I'm not going to be petty like them. I attended the wake. I signed the condolence book there at the house. I, along with executive members of the National Transformation Alliance, we went and signed the condolence book in different parts, in different corporations. So I did what I had to do. Me not being invited, that's the difference with Karen and myself, or Timothy and myself. I am not invited. I am not going to impose myself to cause anything. There's something we learned in the military. You comply and then complain. Now, after it has ended, now I could go and expose the incompetence, the immaturity of this government in how they have operated. And again, anybody who's PNM till they die, you cannot talk and discuss protocol with me. I lived it. I was the person who, as I said, who coordinated the biggest state funeral in Trinidad and Tobago since Larry Constantine. So I know about protocol. I know about state funerals. I know about the invitation list. And what they did was immature. It was irresponsible, but it is how PNM operates.
Gary, Mr. Griffith, I want to go to murders in Trinidad and Tobago. It appears to us, looking from afar, that the RPNM doesn't have a crime plan. And I'm saying appears. I might be being very generous in my description.
Yeah, no, right? You're correct, and I'm glad that you use the R as the RPNM, because the PNM which would have been pre-2010, the type of plans and policies, you saw that the man was ahead of his time. That was Patrick Manning. And again, which is where we speak about things such as the Special Anti-Crime Unit, which is where I piggybacked, and it was known as SORT. I copied it, I cheated, and I called it SORT, SORT. I saw the value of the OPVs, and that's why I acquired the Diamond vessels at 1.2 billion less. I saw the value of the blimp, and that is why I started making arrangements for us to have drones, which will welcome us into the 21st century. And that is where it is that you would have seen what Patrick Manning was doing. He was moving ahead. There was a vision, there were plans, there were policies. In 8 years in this government, this under the RPNM, they can't name one policy, one unit, one thing that they have done other than attack anyone who is opposed to the government. So their crime plan has been nothing else but try to discredit people, try to demonize them, try to get them arrested, try to spend 90% of their time about legal firearms when 99.9% of all the murders by firearms in the last 10 years have been by illegal firearms, which they have not touched. So it is unfortunate, but that is how they operate, because they know fully well, regardless of what they say or do, right? They could do whatever they want in Dunkirk, Port of Spain, and shoot everyone in cold blood. They know that 150, 200,000 people will still vote for them. And that is where our country is. Thankfully, there's those floating voters, those 150,000 who are not paying till are dead or are born at UNC or die at UNC. That 150,000 would have been mostly the Congress of the People voters in 2007. They are still there. And what I have done through myself and our team, we have reignited that team, and that 150,000, they have come back out, which is why you'd have seen the difference of 190,000 votes to 130,000 in the local government election. So to all, let your heart not be bothered. It is thankfully the PNM till they die supporters who are saying to themselves, listen, I know they don't have a crime plan. It could affect my child reaching home. It can cause my daughter to be raped. It can cause my son to be kidnapped. It can cause my wife to be killed. I don't care. Even if it increases, I'm still going to vote for PNM. Indirectly, you're basically stating that your love for the PNM is greater than you wanting to secure your family. I will think that anybody who is a citizen of any country, the paramount importance is safety and security. Nothing else matters other than that. Without that, you can't live. And you're saying, I will still vote for this man and these people, even though they're incompetent, even though it may put increase the risk of my family dying or being raped or kidnapped. But because I love the PNM, that is unbelievable to me. I can never understand that.
But yeah, Gary, you want to address that question that we just talked about?
Yeah, sure.
With respect to why people have this. I mean, I don't understand it. They say all, not but all.
So let me clarify. And I understand your concern. There's always that concern. Anytime governments change, you shut down, you dismantle, you remove. But I mean, if you look at myself as Commissioner of Police, there were 117 policies and units I put in place. They all were dismantled. And that's what, when I left, there was 342 murders in my last year, which was the lowest number of murders in 17 years. A year later, it went up to over 600, because all of the things from the Rapid Response Unit, the Emergency Response Patrol, the Operation Command Center, the Gender-Based Violence Unit, the Social Media Monitoring Unit, the body cameras, the pepper spray, the tasers, the GPS on the vehicles, the dashboard, live cameras on the Emergency Response Patrol vehicles, and I could go on and on. They shut down everything out of pettiness, and now we are paying the price. The same too, in 2010, there was this perception that the UNC, the People's Partnership, shut down everything. When you ask the average PNM supporter, say that, debate with me, let's hear what it is. So there were three main things, three alone, and I just mentioned them. The first one was the OPV. But when you ask people, how could the OPV be a crime fighting tool when it was never in the first place? How do you know what would have been the relevance? Patrick Manning was acquiring the offshore patrol vessels not to secure us from crime. The priority of it was to secure our exclusive economic zone, that is known as the EEZ. That is from 12 miles to 200 miles out. That is to secure the vast resources that we'll have in our waters. Also, it was to be used to secure a pipeline he was planning to build from Trinidad going all the way up to Jamaica. That is what the OPV was for. So the nonsense they speak about, well, the OPV would have automatically stopped drugs and weapons entering the country, total nonsense. 97% of the illegal drug weapons that enter our country come through the legitimate ports of entry. So the Coast Guard and an OPV would not be stopping a container entering our ports. That has to do with customs and immigration and security and scanners in the legitimate ports of entry. So the offshore patrol vessel, the concern that we had at the time, when I became National Security Advisor, we were paying $2.4 billion for the 3 OPVs. That's 800 million TT each. When it is I had communication with Korea, with Colombia, and Israel. We were getting the exact OPVs for 400 million TT each, half the price. So we were going to pay 1.2 billion more than what we were getting from other countries. So the PNM till I die, I ask you right now, when we finish here, type BAE, that's Bravo Alpha Echo /corruption. You will find 17 countries sued this company for paying kickback to government officials. So what I did, when it is that they scrapped the OPV because after 17 odd months, they could not deliver on time. So they failed to deliver, which is why all the money came back to Trinidad and Tobago. It's not to say that we scrapped something and lost the money. I then acquired the diamond vessels, which were used in 17 other countries, and at a cost of 1.2 billion TT less to do the exact things that the OPV could have done. So I saved the country $1,200 million while still getting quality vessels to do the same job. So that's the OPV. 2, they spoke about the Special Anti-Crime Unit of Trinidad and Tobago. But at that time when it was operating, we went to 538 murders. Kidnappings was the highest ever. So it was not working. Something was wrong. When we got into government, I understood what happened. And that's why I changed it to the National Security Special Operation Group, a highly trained unit of an interagency task force, highly polygraphed, that will be able to be that front line, which is what I also did as Commissioner of Police, which is when I formed the Special Operation Response Team that put fear into the criminals, that pegged back the criminals, that put an end to kidnapping, and they decided to scrap it after I left. The third one had to do with the Goodyear blimp. You were using a blimp. A blimp is something that is totally comical to try to do with air surveillance, because welcome to the 21st century PNM supporters, there's something called drones. You don't use a Goodyear blimp. The drones are something that is used worldwide. So instead of a Goodyear blimp with 16 soldiers taking a big rope and holding it as if they're they're lassoing and playing tug of war to try to pull it down, we were getting drones. As the Minister of National Security, I got the tender and everything for the drones. And as soon as I left as Minister of National Security, the PNM scrapped it. So for those people who love to speak about scrapping, what we can't speak about is that, as I conclude, 2014 was the highest reduction in serious crime in 31 years because of the diamond vessels, because of the National Security Special Operation Group, because of the National Security Training Academy, because we formed the National Operations Center that was recommended by the Commission of Inquiry into the attempted coup to prevent a repeat of that. We formed the Rapid Response Unit, which would have been 100 vehicles that will turn up within 5 minutes at any distress call. All of these things were instrumental towards the highest reduction in serious crime in 31 years. All of these things were shut down as soon as PNM got in the government in 2016. So when they speak about scrapping and dismantling, everything that the PNM did up to 2010 did not work. So you scrapping something that did not work and you complain. But in 2014 into 2015, we had dozens of policies that worked and you scrapped it.
You know, it's interesting, right? When we look at murders for the year already, I think we had, yesterday was 16 or something. 16 was yesterday or 2 days ago.
Yeah.
17
or 18, yeah.
Yeah, we already there. You know, but Gary, we saw 2 things happen, right? We saw one with a woman police constable in St. Joseph, right? And she was having a bad day. And then we saw another police on the street slapping away a man's phone, right? What is your take on those 2 things? And looking at disciplinary problems for when things like this happen.
Well, I asked all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and all of you all up there, don't write off or knock the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. These were the same police officers just 2 years ago where public trust and confidence moved from 14% in 2018 to 59% in 2021. The police service got the highest spike in public trust and confidence in any arm in the public service in Trinidad and Tobago. That is how much the public trusted them. Discipline was there. People started feeling good about seeing police officers. Police officers would be at roadblocks and giving persons tickets for adhering to the law. That is how good people felt. there was a degree of comfort. After a year, from August 2021 to after I left, a year later, it moved from 59% to 8%. And it had to do with these certain things that I put in place again that they shut down. We had specific things such as polygraph testing, mandatory drug testing, using intelligence to ascertain the rogue police officers that were probably controlling drug blocks or whatever. And we can't fire them, but we can have them reassigned because we knew what they were doing with assisting in protecting the criminal elements. I reduced $100 million per annum in overtime corruption, with a couple of about 200 police officers claiming they were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 30 days a month. And by doing that, they were claiming to work like about over 10, 12,000 US a month, when really and truly they should be getting 2,000 US a month. Those are the things we put in place. As it pertained to police officers being absent from court, there was a 91% reduction in police absenteeism that caused criminals to realize, even though I'm arrested now and charged, I can't get away because of the slack police officer. So the things were there. What happened in this situation, we had something known as online reporting. We are so backward. Earlier, Christopher and McDonald Jacob feared technology. So thanks to the NYPD, where I formed a bilateral agreement with the NYPD, I went up to New York. I met 2 different police commissioners. They showed me the different things from the social media monitoring unit, the gender-based violence unit, the type of technology that was being used, and systems to train our police officers in customer service training and public relations. Then they showed us that concept of online reporting, where if it is that that a woman is being beaten by her husband, she doesn't have to go to a police station. She goes online, it goes straight to the gender-based violence unit, and they come to your home. Delivery service. If you have a problem with a bounce check or fraud or a robbery, you just send it online, it goes straight to the unit, and the unit will come to your home. People no longer need to go to police stations. That is backward banana republic policing. And then if it's something that's an emergency, you dial 999, and that 999 was linked to a National Operation Command Center. We will see where the house is, and the vehicles in closest proximity will get to your home, which ensured at that time less than a 5-minute response, which put an end to kidnapping, which put an end to home invasions. And as I said, with the online reporting, there was no need for that person to have called the police station. So this police officer who said, why don't come to a station and make the report? We have gone back to the backward aspect of policing, and it is not required. The online reporting had put an end to this. And finally, with these situations, what usually happens now is that you know that I will be rude and obnoxious to somebody, and then you will hear Earl Christopher say, well, we'll have an investigation. What investigation? The lady, you saw it, clear as day. The man takes a phone and slaps it out of a man's hand. There's going to be an investigation. Let me tell you what that means. That means we are going to drag it on for a few years, hope that people forget, and the individual will stay there. Had I been commissioner, those 2 people in local parlance, they throat bust. They would have been suspended immediately, and the tone will be set from day 1. I suspend you. You have a problem, take me to court. And I me suspending you immediately. No other police officer would have done that because they knew what would have happened. No, you could do that, and now we'll hear an investigation is ongoing.
Mr. Griffith, what about moving the officer to another location, maybe that may be far away from his home or so? What do you think of that?
Well, I'm hearing about that. I don't know if that is confirmed or not because I keep hearing Toko. But if you keep sending bad police to Toko Station, how many police officers could fit in Toko Station? And then nobody will want to go and visit Toko. So that is definitely not the way to go, right? Reassigning the problem. If there's intelligence to know that an officer is involved in something, but you don't have enough evidence to discipline them or suspend them, then you can reassign them. But the person has committed something wrong. You don't reassign them, you suspend them and set the tone. And with that being done, no other police officer will do that. And that is why under the 3 years under my watch, you did not have that. You did not have these incidents because the police officers knew there was a commissioner of police that was very radical. And as soon as you cross the line, you're going to be suspended, if not fired, if not charged.
Talk your talk. Now you heard what I said. Didn't I say about suspension? If it's possible to, if they rank, you can also give them a lower rank if that's possible. Mr. Griffith, let me know. But well, this just taking the person and sending them to Toko, transfer that ain't.
You've transferred the problem. The person is still getting
working.
And nothing has done. And then with that now, the deterrent is no longer there. The product of opportunity, it makes police officers believe that I could just do this and nothing will happen. No, you
I'm saying,
suspend them, get rid of them.
Mr. Wickham, what about what about in retraining? Because in the military law enforcement organization, there's a lot of money put into training an individual, right? So you just send them somewhere and whatever. You can't just do that, Anthem. You have to address the problem, and let it go down, or you suspend the person. Oh Lord, you hit them in the pocket.
Yeah,
They'll understand.
and especially if this person is an SRP, I will fire them immediately and then let them take me to court. But the message will be sent to the other 6,999 police officers that if any of that takes place, immediately I'm not going to have a commissioner of police that will launch an investigation. What is there to investigate? It's cut and dry. You saw it there. There was no need. Even as soon as she sent that message, you have been suspended with immediate effect and half of your pay cut. All the other police officers will realize, okay, sir. And that is why in the 3 years from 2018 to 2021, we were not getting those issues. It's not coincidental, we're getting it now because the few rogue officers realize that the product of opportunity is back there for me to do what I want, act in an irresponsible manner. There's no liaison with the police complaint authority, and there's not going to be anything substantive to take an action on me. So what they'll do, they transfer me, well, better yeah, Toko, I could go and sunbathe and stuff now instead of being in St. Joseph. That is not the way to go. The way to go is swift justice, and it sets the tone for all other police officers.
But let me say this. I have no problem, absolutely no problem with suspension and taking away their salary, because that is much harsher than transferring them. So I have absolutely no problems with that, because if that is going to make the other officers understand, you see this fella over here, you see what he did? These are the consequences of his actions. If you did something similar, you can suffer the similar consequences. I got no problem with you suspending them and taking away. If that, because that's more harsher than what I was talking about. I have no problems with that. I have no problems with that at all, because I think in these situations, these times call for tough measures. These tough times don't call for no pat on the back. It calls for tough measures.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, you're correct. And there's another point too. When you transfer the person and everyone knows what the person did, those persons in that community now will say, so wait a minute, so you don't care about us? Why must we be imposed with this person? So he or she is not good enough for St. Joseph, but they're good enough for by us? That can't be right.
No, Gary, what about the 5% reduction in crime? Is not a good thing?
Of course it is. And I mean, people try to discredit it and say, well, it's irrelevant. But had there been a 5% increase, there would have been a whole set of talk. Having said that, it reminded me, sorry for going back to New York City. When I did a lot of my work when I prepared for law enforcement, looking at America's finest. In the mid-90s, through Rudy Giuliani, Bernard Kerik, Bill Bratton, and so forth, there was a 57% reduction in violent crime and 50% reduction in murders. Now, that's amazing. But when they did the polls, the vast majority of citizens in New York City did not feel any safer. They didn't. And they realized they had failed because the reducing the crime did nothing to make them feel safer. So they had to revamp the NYPD, train them in customer service, put systems to let people know that if I call 999, I'll have an immediate response, understand that the rogue police officers were being removed. And that is what lifted public confidence and trust. So the perception and fear of crime reduction is as important, if not even more, than the crime statistics itself. So to have 602 murders, and now this time around we had 578, you can't stay there and be pleased about it. It's the 2 highest number of murders in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And what made it worse is that the perception of people actually have been more fearful in 2023 of crime than they did in 2022 when there were higher murders. So that, I think, is what Christopher, there's something that they do not understand, that aspect of policing and law enforcement, where the fear of crime is more important than the reduction itself. Because moving from 602 to 588, basically what that is the Martin Joseph line. It's a decrease in the increase. And we can't be going with a decrease in the increase. And that, I mean, just because up until I said 2021, under my watch, my last year was 342. We've gone to almost double in 2 years. And you can't just be saying, well, we're on the right track. So if it was just one less murder, you're on the right track. No, we are failing. We are failing miserably. And it has to do specifically because of politicians interfering in an independent process and shutting down and dismantling things that worked, that put fear in criminals just 2 years ago.
You know, I look at numbers for New York City. As a matter of fact, here it is, right? U.S. homicide falls in 2023. New York City, 2023, 380 homicides. 2022, 429, down 11%. Los Angeles, 2023 homicides, 377. 2022, 422, down 16%. Chicago, you know about Chicago, do or die Chicago. 2023 homicides, 599. 2022 homicides, 688, down 13%. A lot of these states, Philadelphia, 2023 homicides, 403. 2022 homicides, 508, down 21%. Many of these places are showing a reduction in homicides, and they have way more citizens than Trinidad and Tobago. When we look at New York City, you have about 8 to 9 million people in New York City. How come, Mr. Griffith, that the Minister of National Security and Prime Minister Rowley, who is head of the National Security Council, can come and take some picture out of these guys' books and see what they are doing and try to implement it in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, as I said, that was done. From August 2018, 2019, I was milking everything I saw from the NYPD. And it worked. The systems, the units, the technology, they worked. When we put an end to kidnapping, it was the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, persons were being held while still holding the victims. We were kicking down doors whilst they were there. That never happened before. There were over 10 kidnappings that we solved by rescuing the victim whilst the kidnapper was there. We've gone back now where the person is kidnapped, the police will wait, pay the ransom, and say, oh, the person has been released. That is not a success. The kidnappers have won. And going back to what you said, I'm so pleased that you used that, because the one thing of the PNM till they die supporters is when there was the highest reduction in violent crime in 17 odd years under my watch. They said it was because of COVID. But when you look at New York, Boston, LA, Detroit, Chicago, almost every single city in the United States, crime increased during COVID. So I guess all the criminals, the murderers, the rapists, they missed the memo by the PNM supporters, because it seemed that only the PNM supporters in Trinidad said, well, no, under COVID, criminals don't commit crime. But in the United States, they missed that memo. Guyana and Jamaica was the same thing. What happens is after COVID, you now get better opportunities. Persons now starting getting jobs. People are now getting people are no longer being cramped up in their homes. Employment will now start to increase, and that is why you're getting a better after COVID. Now it makes life easier for persons. People are less frustrated. But the PNM till they die supporters said it was because of COVID. It seemed that they did a poll and they went to this murderer. So you stop killing people because of COVID. Okay, I don't know if they did a poll, but it shows how stupid they were and desperate not to accept the fact that what was happening with the massive reduction in crime was because of us doing exactly that. Looking at things that worked in the United States and other countries and utilizing the technology, the units, the policies, the programs, and the political will, if they wanted. And that caused a major reduction. That, unfortunately, as I said, they've shut down and removed all of the things that I utilized and I found very beneficial through NYPD and others. And because of that, we are back to the old-time policing in the 70s and the 80s in Trinidad and Tobago. From going to a police station to make a report, if somebody commits a crime, you can't call 999. They'll put you on hold. You have to call a police station and find their number. You call the station and there are no vehicles available. We are back to how it was in the 80s and 90s. I brought in that concept of 21st century policing, things known as predictive policing, stopping the murders from taking place before it happens. That social media monitoring unit they had in NYPD, I saw it. It had gangs making comments that allowed them to solve crimes or to stop a crime from happening. And all of these different things, they shut down and dismantle because of petty PNM politics. And you could still vote for that. And again, this is not to discredit the PNM. The PNM have done so much for this country. It is the RPNM. Thankfully, when you have that 300,000 who vote for the PNM, roughly between 50 to 70,000 are not PNM till are dead blindly. They do not want the RPNM, and they're going to send that message next year.
Yeah, I think I fully agree that it's the RPNM, and this RPM is not good for Trinidad and Tobago. I've said it, and I'm going to keep saying it. You know, this RPM is wicked and evil. I've said it, and I'm not afraid to say it. Because when I look at most of these statistics, this RPNM is not even doing good for the people that support them.
Yeah.
The people that supports the RPNM, those people in Lavantil, Mova, Beatum, who have supported the PNM, but I think the PNM have a rude awakening coming. I honestly believe that.
Well,
Because the
as I
young
said that, during local government election, I said I wanted the 31 hardest seats. I wanted to get into the belly of the beast. And I walked Cameron Hill. I walked Simeon Road. I walked up in the hills in Lavantil, in Beatum, in Belmont, in Sealots, in Tacarigua, in Tunapuna, all in Arima, the hills in Arima. And everywhere I went, what did I got from, and this is PNM Heartland, they have never seen the political leader of the PNM in those areas. And it was amazing. I said, well, but I am here and I will continue to be here to support you. They were shocked. They've never seen a political leader in any of those areas I went. And that says a lot. It really says a lot about how they have totally been ignored, because the hierarchy of the PNM presently know fully well we don't need to study them. They are going to blindly vote for us.
You know, it's interesting you say that, right? There is a building in Chumaka, Clavantil, where I grew up. Building 2. It burned down in 2011 under the UNC. The UNC relocated the people, everyone there, to Oropun. And it was close to the end of the year. And the current prime minister, who was in opposition at that time, paid a visit to that community with Donna Cox, Nylan Hippolyte, and a few other people. And I'm saying to myself, well, yeah, boy, when Prime Minister Rowley come in power, and if he come in power in 2015, then people are going to go get that building taken care of. I personally had to fight for that building from America in order for the PNM, a constituency that have never forsaken the PNM in all their life, and a person from foreign had to fight for the PNM to renovate that building. They haven't seen Dr. Rowley since then. I mean, they see him on TV. You understand? They see him on TV and they see him on the phone, right? But other than that, well, they don't see Phil Geraldines either. So I really can't.
Yeah. Well, answer. But again, his own constituency. During local government election, I walked through Church Street, into Scorpion, all up to the end of Scorpion, all through his constituency. And people like what they said, this man has been there as their member of parliament for almost 3 decades, and they've never seen him. He has never walked the area, and he because he believes it's PNM country.
You know, and I know something. You know something, Gary. You know what most of the PNM and he go along, get along, our PNM gang they say about me? Oh God, he hate Dr. Rowley. I say I hate. Them went into my heart and figure out there's a certain part of my heart had Dr. Rowley in it, right? And that part they have a H on it. It have a HR. Hate Dr. Rowley. Hate Rowley. Right? And I asked them, I said, but wait now, why would I take my good heart and go and hate Dr. Rowley? For what? I hate their policies. I do, and I'm going to speak about it, right, until we don't see them no longer. Me afraid to say the truth? Yeah, because they are not good for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, they are worse for people that look like Prime Minister Rowley. I'm afraid to say. But, Mr. Griffith, it's always a pleasure. Anything you like to add?
Yeah, well, again, if we look at,
I see a social media guy, Kevin Saran. That's Kevin Saran is, yeah.
Yeah, well, he's quoted as saying, and if the government can't solve the problem, then they themselves are part of the problem. And remember, closing thing is on that. I will always be a patriot before a politician. When I made that statement in February last year, I realized that Keith Rowley did not know what to do. He was clueless. I have seen Kamala Prasad-Bissessar as the chair of the National Security Council. She's not a security expert, but she was able to use her leadership to manage. I was the so-called expert. So compare Kamala Prasad-Bissessar as head of the Security Council to Keith Rowley. Compare Fitzgerald Hines to Gary Griffith as minister, and myself as commissioner to Erla Christopher. So he has a poor batting lineup. It's like the President West Indies cricket team. And if it is your real, so because of that, I said I am willing to help. And if it is that this man was anything as a strategist, he will say, look, let's take the support from these external people. If crime goes down, people will see me as a statesman, and crime will go down, so we will stay in government. If it is that we still fail, I could say, look, you see, they are a waste of time, so don't bother to bring them in government. Any politician with their sword will have understood that. It was a win-win situation for him. But you know what? Remember the words of Patrick Manning. When a man can't have his way, you see hate, you see bitterness, you see somebody totally out of control. So what Keith Rowley has basically said is, look, I don't care whether Gary Griffith could come back and assist to reduce crime and save lives. Let it stay this way. It is better that the country drown in blood than for me to swallow my pride and work with him. You can't be a leader and want to do that. You can't be a leader and watch people dying and you're not willing to do what is required because of your bitterness and hatred for persons. His bitterness, his hatred, his anger has caused him now to make emotional decisions. As a leader, you must never make decisions when you're angry.
Gary, I don't know, somebody asking a question here. Mr. Griffith, can you share any light on
Well, yeah,
involving Michael?
this is an incident that took place in Long Circular Mall earlier today. I do not know the state of the individual. Initially, what I looked at, it looked like it wasn't any, the gunshot wasn't any vital parts of his body, but again, you never know, it's a gunshot. It happened in Long Circular Mall in the bottom part of the car park. I think he just came from the gym or something along that line, and he was shot. But at this time, he's still he's stable. That's the last I heard about it.
Oh, okay, all right. We didn't hear anything. So again, Mr. Griffith, we want to thank you so very kindly for taking the time to join us, and it's always a pleasure having you in the village. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Take care.
Thank you, Mr.
All
Griffith.
right, bye.